Welcome, lovely people. I'm just recording a short piece that describes the outcome of the Oxford Diocesan Parish Share review. It's going to be implemented from 2023. We discussed this at the Deanery Synod we had earlier in the week, and sadly the recording didn't stick, which means that I decided it was going to be worthwhile me going back and re-recording a piece so that you are going to be able to view that later on. So this is that piece. Do feel free to get back to me to discuss anything you want to, or even to talk to the Parish Share office in the diocese, if that will give you more clarity. But feel free to contact me. Please note that this system doesn't ask for any new monies. This system simply looks to change the requested monies that the diocese has to raise from parish shares. It changes the way that they're spread between the deaneries. Each deanery then is going to make a decision about how it takes its deanery share and splits it between the parishes. That's one of the jobs that we're going to have to do within the Cowley Deanery. There are a whole series of elements that come together, and what I'm going to attempt to do is to build up a picture of how that works. It's the best understanding that I have at the moment. It may not end up being a complete understanding, but it's the understanding I have at the moment. So the first portion of this is about the cost of ministry, and that's linked to the number of ministers that we have licensed within our parishes. We have 12 stipendiary posts in Cowley. Each one of those will cost us £39,339. So each one of those will have that, and then each one of those stipendiary posts has a vicarage that is linked with it, and each one of those will cost us £10,560 each. So for the cost of ministry, of stipendiary ministry, we add those ones together. It comes to £598,790. That's for 2023. Interestingly, we don't have any house for duty posts. They would cost us £10,560 each. They have them in North Oxford and elsewhere in the diocese, but we don't have any that are linked with us. Then every year there are a number of the stipendiary ministry posts across the diocese that are vacant. Vicars have retired or they've moved on and it's taking time to get a new vicar in. So they've got vacant posts. The savings for those are going to be spread across the diocese in proportion to the number of stipendiary posts in each deanery. So if you've got 20 posts in your deanery, you would have a vacancy saving that is twice the size of a deanery that has got 10 posts. As I say, we have 12 posts that we're working with, and the vacancy saving is £39,640 per post, spread across the whole of the diocese. Interestingly, during a vacancy, the vicarages still need to be maintained and looked after, so there isn't a saving that comes from that. Largely comes from the stipend element. So we've now got two parts of our formula that come together. We've got the cost of ministry, which for Cowley Deanery is £598,780. And then we've got a vacancy saving which reduces that by £39,640. The third part of our formula, training costs, and that's a new aspect that's come in here. It's not because it's new money that is being added, it's just previously been dealt with in a different way to collect it or to assign it within the deanery share. So it's not new money, but a new arrangement for distributing that cost. Previously it was hidden in other categories, It includes the costs of our Diocesan Directors of Ordinands and our Ministry Vocations Advisors and the training courses we run within the diocese to train ministers and to keep ministers up to date and trained. Previously it had been categorised as Church of the Future costs, allocated on an ability to pay factor and taking into account the Experian-derived community profile score, electoral roll and average October Sunday attendances. But that bit is being left behind and we're using a new form for it from 2023. In that, the cost that is incurred by the diocese is going to be distributed across the deaneries on a basis of full-time stipendiary equivalents. So that's going to include stipendiary posts and then local supported posts. We have some people that are paid by a local church rather than by the diocese. Each of those will count as a whole full-time equivalent. House for duty posts are going to count for 0.4. And self-supporting ministers, they're going to count for 0.4 as well. On top of that, local licensed ministers, LLMs, will count as 0.05. And when you add up all of those within the deanery, you end up with a figure which for Cowley, the figure being used for next year, is going to be 15.05. 15.05. And that's going to add to our deanery share £186,000, £168,080. £168,080. So now we've got three parts that are adding to our formula for calculating the deanery share. We've got the cost of ministry. We're reducing from that some vacancy savings because not all of the vicars' posts are full. And we're going to add to that some training costs. Then we've got something that's linked in with the statutory fees. That's the Diocesan Board of Finance fees for weddings, funerals, for churchyards and things like that. Previously, each deanery has had its fees returned to it from 2 years previous. So they've gone out and then they've come back. In the new scheme, it distributes them on the basis of full-time equivalent posts. And that significantly reduces the challenges of processing this at a central level, therefore it reduces the cost. Our projected fee return for this budget of 2023 is £36,818. And off the top of my head, I can't remember whether that's going to be slightly more than we would usually get or whether it will be less. But it's not exactly the same. So we now have four parts of our formula. We've got the cost of ministry, then we're taking away a bit because we've got some vacant posts, then we're adding an element for training costs, and we're taking away an element because of the statutory fees that are being returned to the deanery by the Diocesan Board of Finance. The next element is the distribution of glebe money. In Oxford, we've been blessed that we've got some very good land and property that historically we've been given, and there is money that is generated by that every year. This year, or in for this coming budget, it's going to be £2,615,632. And 1.8 million of that will continue to be specifically distributed to support communities where it's needed. There's an additional 80,000 that takes us up to that bigger figure, which in 2023 to 2025 will be distributed to the 5 deaneries within the Oxford to Cambridge arc, which are Bicester and Islip, Buckingham, Claydon, Mersley and Newport. So, the balance of the budget from glebe investment income will be distributed through the Parish Share scheme in accordance with the cost of stipendiary ministers in each deanery. So it's going to be on the full-time equivalence basis like other parts. And our allocation within the budget is £100,823. So that gives us an extra part of here. We've got the cost of ministry minus the vacancy saving, plus the training costs, minus the statutory fees, and then a distribution of some glebe support. Then we've got the allocation of some support grants. Currently, this is distributed using the ability to pay calculations. It takes into account the Experian-derived community profile scores and the electoral roll and the average Sunday attendance. Our deanery churches have 2.5% of the diocesan electoral roll. They have 2.8% of the diocesan average weekly attendance. And when you look at the measurement of deprivation in the area, we get a score of 17.06. It's the second lowest within the diocese. Milton Keynes is only lower, and so it's coming across as the second highest level of deprivation within the diocese. We've got a couple of things that are going to be added together. So we've got the deanery electoral roll is calculated as a percentage of the diocesan electoral roll, and that's multiplied by the IMD income score, the 17.06, and that's added to the deanery average attendance as a proportion of the diocesan total times the relative IMD, the deprivation income score, 17.06, and that gives us the ability to pay figure that we get, the ability to pay score. When we work that out, our part of the budget that we get from that, which is our contribution to central costs, comes as £89,177. And just so you can see how that's calculated, for Cowley we've got 2.5 times 17.06 plus 2.8 times 17.06, which gives us 0.9. And the ability to pay score as a percentage of the total diocesan ability to pay score of 61.56 is used to allocate our support costs. So that brings us nearly to the last component, which is the community support allowance. And the diocese support allowance, across the diocese there's a fund of £100,000 that's been set aside and is allocated to support deaneries. We get £30,000 of that. And so that adds to our formula as well. And when we put all of that together, we discover that we end up with the pluses and the minuses with an amount that the diocese calculates that they are going to ask us for of £526,446. Compared with last year, it was £472,019, which is an increase of 15%. And it would look likely that slowly we will need to head towards that percentage increase. Over the next few years, we're looking at the diocese is looking at putting a cap on the amount. Deanery shares aren't going to drop more than 2% or rise more than 2% this year. Overall, the diocese has set a budget, which means that overall they're going to ask for the same amount across the diocese, but some will pay more, some will pay less. We're one of the deaneries that will be paying quite a lot more in the long term. In the short term, we've got a 2% cap on the increase. So that brings the amount that we're going to be asked for to be reduced down to £481,446. £459. So previously it was £472,000 with a bit. This year it's going to be £481,000. About £9,500 more. So my hope is that that's just given you an insight. We continued in Synod and discussed some of the consequences and some of the questions that came out of that. You'll better pick those up from the minutes from the Deanery Synod meeting. We are going to have challenges as we go forward, as we're going to be looking to ensure that we can live up to the requests that the diocese is going to make for us. It's going to be very challenging, but the Lord will be with us and he will guide us and he'll help us, and we will work towards that. Every year there's going to be a review of this system, and that system won't be completely replaced, but we can look at the components of it and see what we need to do to adjust. So prayerfully hold that in your mind, and I'm hoping that things will go really, really well as we head towards deciding how to spread that within our deanery here in Cowley.